Okay, perfect. All right, so SkyVisualEditor is a platform that allows you to create Visualforce pages without any code. It's going to be done in a drag-and-drop environment. It's designed to be something that a non-developer can easily pick up and leverage to make very rich and complex Visualforce pages. Now, if you are a developer and you happen to like code, this tool, the platform, if you will just allow you to significantly expedite the rate at which you can create your Visualforce pages. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's not something that we're designing to completely offset a developer. This is just simply to enhance the experience of power users and then to provide non-technical people with greater avenues to make Salesforce easier to use and more specific to their business needs. So the page that we have on the screen, I'm going to show you a couple of quick examples of some pages that I've made, and then we'll recreate a few of these as we go through today's demo. So the page that we're looking at right now is what we call a search template. So the search template allows you to create fields that the end user would be able to type in values for and find data in a more granular and precise fashion. So instead of having to use the search bar at the top of the screen and use a wildcard search like the asterisk at the end of it, so you may type in like INC and an asterisk to find anything that's got that included in the name. Instead of trying to find accounts that way, well, what we can do now is find accounts in a more broad sense. So I can have my sales team go and find all accounts that have an annual revenue between $10,000 and $1 billion, as an example. And now we can just quickly search that, and it'll pull back all of the search results and show that subset of data. So what we found is that most companies like to have their sales staff go and make reports. The challenge that we've seen is that most sales staff are not properly trained on how to make reports in Salesforce, and so they wind up dumping all of these requests on administrators to make these rich reports or views so the sales staff can properly find what they need, or support teams or whoever else you have at the company. So instead of doing that, you can give them a page where the input fields are very simple to understand, but yet very powerful in the complex logic that actually goes back and queries on the back end to retrieve all of this data. So once you have these records pulled back, notice these are in input mode, so I can actually go in and make mass changes if I want. So I'll show how to do some of this as we go through today's demo. The next portion is if we actually open up one of these records, this is going to be an account page. So we'll recreate a portion of this today as part of the first set of demonstration. Now, some of the things that I'll show at the top real quick is that there are 3 columns. So you can get out of the 2-column view of Salesforce and condense the amount of scrolling that your users have to go through. So you can have more than 3 as well. Just 3 is what I chose for this example. But you can have typically 3 to 5. It's what we see for most of our customers. But you do have the flexibility of going higher than that in case you really want to cram a lot of data on a single page. Then also there are tabs inside of this view. So now you can organize or compartmentalize your data in ways that make sense to your end users. So instead of them having to scroll down to the bottom of the page to find the related information they need, you can now add it to a tab. And it's not just related information. If you notice, the 3rd tab I've got is shipping information. These are just other fields on the page that I want to put inside of a tab so it's easy for the users to find. It's very simple for them to click on it, and they don't have to scroll around and figure out where those are. So now what we're going to do is kind of go through some of the actual opportunity information. I'll show you what one of these looks like inside of the edit mode, and we'll create this edit mode page for you today. So on this page, notice this is just a different layout. You can set these up however you'd like. The far left-hand side has got all of the fields for the account, and then the right-hand side has got the tabs again. Well, the thing that we're going to do that makes this page a little bit unique from the other ones are that we can add in related information directly in line without having to transition screens. So we're going to show you ways to improve the data input accuracy and efficiency of your teams, so they're not having to open up 3 to 4 pages, enter new records. They can add in whatever they need on the same and significantly increase that data entry speed. And then the last thing that we'll cover is what we call our forms use case. So this basically is for anybody who has a pen and paper form that they want to put into Salesforce. The typical layout that you see on the screen is what you have when you try and do it without a Visualforce page. It's not, there's nothing wrong with this page. It's just that it doesn't look like the typical pen and paper form that you were previously using. So instead of going through a page like this, what we can do is create a page that actually looks like and mimics the functionality of the actual form. So this becomes a great user experience if you have something like communities in place or internal documents that have to be filled out and signed or something of that nature. You can have all of this done right inside of Salesforce, and this can be the view state or the edit mode of these records, as well as converting them into PDFs. So we'll talk about how to set all this up as well. And then the last one, after we go through kind of those basics, is how to string all of these together with Wizard. So the Wizard is basically an alternative approach to using Salesforce's visual workflow. So it'll give you the ability to create a prompter process or some kind of step-by-step walkthrough that you have the users go through. But it will use the first couple of demonstrations that I'm going to have as kind of a foundation for everything else. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. So how does this actually work? Well, what we have is an AppExchange package that gets installed inside of Salesforce, and then we also have a design studio. Now, our design studio is separate and outside of the Salesforce environment. So you can go to SkyVisualEditor.com and sign up for the design studio, and it will ask you to input in your Salesforce credentials to connect into whatever organization you'd like to work with. Once you do that, you're presented with the screen that we have here. So on the far left-hand side are going to be all of the fields that you can work with and drag onto the canvas, as well as any components that you would like to work with and drag onto the canvas. Then the far right-hand side are all of the components in terms of the properties. So let's say that you select a field, there will be several properties that you can change without having to dig through code to get that stuff entered. And the center of the screen is going to be all of the page itself that you're going to physically deploy into Salesforce. And so you get a visual cue on how this is going to look before you actually deploy it. So it allows you to make maintenance changes extremely fast, as well as create your pages at an incredible rate. So let's go ahead and make the first couple of pages. The first one I'm going to show is how to import in and leverage your existing page layouts. You've already got them built in Salesforce, so now let's convert them into a Visualforce page and then modify them from there. So how do we do that? We go to File, Load Page Layout, choose the object that you want to work with. It's going to load in all of your record types. And the reason we load in the record types is simply because we need a foundation to work with. It's not going to overwrite these record types. It's not going to automatically save over them or anything of that nature. This is just to use as a sample starting point. Okay? So if you have 3 or 4 record types, it's really not going to matter which ones you choose. It just will impact what fields are actually shown or the order that they're shown on the page. So let's go ahead and select a record type and then click Open. Now what this is going to do is it's going to read in all of your custom fields, your custom relationships that you currently have on that record type, and then display them inside of the tool as if it had been read right inside of the design environment that Salesforce has, inside of the page layout editor that they have created. So once it's loaded on the center of the screen, we'll be able to modify from there. So we'll give it a second to load. All right, and now that it's loaded, we can begin to make some modifications. The first set of modifications that we're going to make are to get out of the 2-column view. Okay, so let's take as an example the account information page block section at the top. We currently have 2 columns for this. So I can select that area and increase that column property that's on the right-hand side of the screen to a 3 or a 4, and we now are provided with a 3rd and a 4th column on this page. So just like you would in a page layout editor, you now can just start to drag and drop your fields wherever they need to go to make this column populated with data. So I'm just going to drag a couple of these fields over to the 4th column, and then we'll drag a couple of the fields from the 1st to the 3rd. Again, it's not designed for you to be a developer, although if you are a developer, great. There's some other areas of the platform that will be really helpful for you. But again, it's designed so that we can just drastically speed up the rate at which Visualforce is created. Now let's also say that you want to have a change to maybe some of the color settings. You don't like the the color settings that Salesforce has for a tab, or you want to indicate maybe a section that's of importance or something of that nature where you are going to highlight an area, one of the things that you can do is select these sections and then override the color settings. So there is a color setting checkbox on the right-hand side. I can check this, change the background color of it. So I'll just change a couple of these real quick. And then this one, we'll change it to a red. Okay, so now we can have different sections color-coded as we need. Now let's go ahead and make some tabs. That's one of the things that we had inside of the account page, and we organized the contact data as well as some of the shipping information inside of those tabs. So we'll recreate that for you today. So we go to Component tab on the left-hand side, and we're going to be shown a large list of components that are available in SkyVisualEditor, one of which is the tabs component. So I can drag this onto the canvas. Notice there's a yellow bar that appears on the page. This tells me where this component is going to be dropped when I let go of the cursor. Okay, so I can let go and I drop the tabs in the center of the page. Now remember, this is not to replace the tabs at the top of Salesforce. This is to just give you containers to organize your data. You can think of them like little subfolders that you want to have the users click through. Okay? So we're going to select tab 1 because that doesn't make much sense from a naming convention for the end user. And on the right-hand side, there's a property called title. So instead of tab 1, we're going to rename this contact data so that the user understands what they're looking at as they're seeing the tab. So we'll just say contact data and click off of it. And now we're going to scroll down to where the related list lives on your current page today. We're going to grab that contact data and drag it upward. And we're just going to drop it inside of tab number 1. Now remember, look for where that yellow line is and then drop it on. So now the contact data lives inside of the tab. We can select tab number 2 and we can put in the opportunity data. So again, just drag it up and drop it in and you're good to go. Now let's say that we want to put the address information inside of tab number 3. So again, we can just quickly rename this so that the user understands what it is. We'll just call this one the address information. And now notice if I select the address information page block section and try and drag it in, that it's grayed out. Well, I can't put it inside of the tab. Why is that? Well, that's because a page block section has to reside within a page block. So there's got to be an outside container that holds that data. So on the left-hand side, it's the second icon, we have page blocks. So you simply drag a page block onto the canvas, and then we can drag the address information inside of that. Well, I don't want component 162 to show. That would not be very user-friendly. So on the right-hand side, there's a property called title. I can simply erase that text, make that go away. And then notice there's the little buttons section above and below that area. Well, that's fine if I have related information there, like I do for my contact data. But for just the address, I don't need that. So again, on the right-hand side, there's a property called button position. I can simply hide that button position, and now that will no longer be shown. Now, if you notice, there's still a large gray section at the top. This is just so you can select that area and actually move it. When we deploy the page, that will not exist. But those are just a quick example of how to get those created. Now let's also give the user the ability to make the contact records at the exact same time as the account. How do we go about doing that? Well, the first thing you must do is put all of the required fields onto the page. Otherwise, your validation rules will prevent the record from being saved, and nothing's going to work properly. So what we can do is right-click full name. This full name is a display-only field, and it is not required, and we can't input anything in it. So I'm going to delete that. And instead, I'm going to input in first name and last name. So I added a column, and now we're going to drag those fields onto the canvas. So we go to the Object tab on the left, find the Related Object tab, and choose the object we want to work with. In this case, it's the contact. And now here are all the fields. So we just need to find the first name and last name, and then drag them onto the canvas. Okay, so there's the first name, and there's the last name. All right, so once we've got this done, let's say that we're done making changes, and we're ready to deploy the page. How do we get that from our platform into Salesforce? Well, remember, at the very beginning, I said when you first log into the studio, our studio asks you for your Salesforce credentials. So we're already authenticated into a Salesforce API connection. So now all we have to do is just deploy the page, and it'll automatically send it over that connection that we've created. So we go to File, click Deploy. It's going to ask you whether you're going to a sandbox, developer, or production environment. Pick whatever one it is, and click Deploy. Now what this is going to do is it's going to save the page that you're looking at on the screen inside of our platform as an XML file, so that as you switch between your different organizations, you can deploy this page across multiple. And then what's actually going to put inside of Salesforce is a Visualforce code, your Apex controller, and the code coverage for that controller. And once it's done deploying, you'll see this nice little pop-up box that tells you the Visualforce page name and the Apex controller name. Now look at those names. They're really long. They don't make a whole lot of sense, and that's just the default naming convention. It's just a big date timestamp. You can rename those on the right-hand side of the properties. There's a section called Name, and you can simply rename that to make more sense to your administrators and developers as they use this. But as you can see, in just a couple of minutes, we've created a page that's quite nice. We've got the black tab coloring at the top. We've got the red at the bottom. We have 4 columns that we're working with. We have contact data inside of a sub-tab. We have the ability to click Add and allow the users to make contact records in line without transitioning screens. And we've even put inside of the address information the block of data that we want that user to work with, so all the address fields. So this is really fast how you make a Visualforce page and get it deployed right inside of Salesforce for you to leverage and utilize. Now, just because the page is deployed doesn't mean it's going to be default and ready and available to use. You do still have to assign it to a view or a Visualforce tab to leverage, but it does exist in your organization to now manage as if you had hand-coded it, which means it can go anywhere that any Visualforce page normally can. So let's go ahead and move on to the free layout. So our free layout is going to be how we're going to recreate this uniform residential loan application. And this one will go a lot faster because we're going to use what we learned in the previous example on how to build into this one. So if we go back into SkyVisualEditor and close this out, we can click File, New, and we have a series of templates or wizards, if you will. A few of these we'll use today, but most of them we won't have time to cover. The free layout is the one that is going to be used for any time you're creating a form of any kind. So if you have anything that needs to be, I don't know, completely out of the normal ranges of what Salesforce allows in terms of the layout, the chances are the free layout's the way to go. So in our case, that's what we need for this form. And we choose the object that we're going to work with. And so I have a custom object that I have created specifically for this form, and I have all of the custom fields on this object to represent each of the fields that exist in this form. Okay, so that's what I've done to create this. Now this could be a standard object or it could be whatever you'd like to have, and you can drag and populate that data as needed. Now how do we actually get the PDF onto the page like I just shown? Well, there's a couple of things you can do before you can leverage it within SkyVisualEditor. The first of which is you find the PDF that you want, then you convert it to a JPEG image, okay, so some kind of image itself, and then you upload it to Salesforce as a static resource. Okay, so convert the PDF to an image and then upload it to Salesforce as a static resource. Now, once you've done that, it then becomes available for our platform to leverage and utilize because until it's in Salesforce, we can't touch it. So on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a section called Background. If we expand that background and click the ellipsis, this is going to go and open all of your Salesforce static resources that are a JPEG or some kind of image file for us to leverage and utilize. So now we're going to find the form that I've uploaded and created, which is my 1003 form, and I click OK. Now this is, since it was a converted PDF, it's going to be quite large and much larger than the actual page that I have on the screen. So what I'm now going to have to do is resize this image to actually fit the form factor we're going to be working with. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, our pages by default are the same resolution as an iPad when it's in landscape mode. Now you can change the resolution on the pages, but we did want them to be compatible with tablet devices. And if you really want them to fit your large 24-inch widescreen monitor, you're welcome to make those changes on the right-hand side with the width and height properties. So if you notice, the page is cut off when we're actually looking at this page. And there is a red border. I don't know how well you can see it on GoToMeeting, but there's a red border around the page itself. That red border indicates what is going to be cut off if we look at it on the tablet device or on the form factor that we're going to be viewing. Okay, so if this was like a smartphone as an example, this would be all that was shown, but we're not going to view it on a smartphone. So on the bottom right, there is the width and height properties that are available to that particular page. I'm going to change this to fit the page that I want. Okay, so as I do that, notice it resizes quite nicely to fit the page. And I just set the width to be the exact same size as the width of the page itself. So the background image just got resized to the page width. That's all I did. Now notice on the page there's a bunch of blank areas, just like if you were going to sign on a document. We now can overlay with fields that are on the left-hand side and drag them onto the canvas and then stretch them to fit that section. Okay, so we do this for a couple of these, but I think you get the point. You just do this for the whole document and set this up. So let's see, interest rates right here. We can put that in. We can shrink this to make it overlap the amount, and then we'll do one more. We'll do like the lender case number. Okay, so there's the lender case number. Now for the lender case number, I want it to be bigger, so I'm going to stretch it and resize it to make it larger. Okay. Now that I've got this done, as you can see, you just do that for the whole document. We then can deploy this page. But one thing I should point out is that since you started from scratch, instead of importing in your pages, there are no buttons. I don't know if you noticed that. There are no buttons on the page. So if I go back to the other page, notice there's a save and a cancel button. So we have to add those onto the canvas. The way we do that is go to the Component tab on the left, scroll down to the section where the buttons are, and we just drag a save and a cancel button onto the page. Now you may be asking yourself, well, that's great. This is an input screen. How do we get things to be display only? Because maybe you want to view that page on the view instead of on the edit. Well, the way to do that is to make your edit page first. Okay, so you can create your edit page. Then what you can do is click Tools, Convert, and it will change all of your input fields to output fields. It's also going to change your Save button and turn it into an Edit button. So now it's going to do all of that reworking for you. It keeps everything else in the exact same place. You don't have to remake the document. Now you just redeploy the page, and you've got it ready to go for a normal view as well. So you have the edit view created and deployed, and then you can also have the normal view created and deployed. Well, I also mentioned that I would show how to set up a PDF. How do we actually do a PDF? Well, on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a section called PDF. So all you would do is expand that area and then check Render as PDF. Now, what this would do is basically take everything that's on the page, including the background image, and reformat it so that it's going to be output as a PDF in your browser. So you can choose the margins, you can choose your page size, and then resize your page as you see fit based on what you're choosing. So a couple of things I need to point out about that. The first of which is that if you're making a PDF in Salesforce, you can't use JavaScript. So don't try. It's not going to work. The other thing to point out is that the pages are different than your typical input pages. So you can use the margins on the bottom. You can use the margins on the bottom to hover over and give you example width and height settings to set your pages on. So that'll help you resize your page to get it in proper PDF view inside of the Design Studio. So once you render it, you can deploy the page as a PDF and then obviously assign it to wherever you'd like for the users to leverage. So that's how you quickly create an input screen that looks like this, or an output screen that would also have a similar look and feel, but with just displayed data. Now let's go through the actual search template. Coming up on, I've got about 7 minutes left to run through this before we open it up for Q&A. So we'll make this quick. So we're going to go to File, click New, and remember, this is going to take us into the different templates. One of the templates is called a search screen. So again, you're going to choose the object you want to search on, choose account, and click OK. Now what this is going to do is take us through a 4-step wizard. Okay, the first step is going to ask us what search criteria we want to leverage. What fields do you want to make available to your users to actually work with and search on? There's two kinds. There's a range of data, and then there's an equivalency check. The top is going to be a range of data. So let's say that at the top of the screen, I want to search for annual revenue of a company between $10,000 and $1 billion. Right? That's what I showed earlier. But we can also search for the number of employees that the company may have, or search for companies that may have an SLA expiration coming up within a certain date range and pull back all of those accounts so that we can go and contact them to ask for a new contract. We can also increase the column count to spread those out. And then the equivalency check would be, let's say, annual revenue again. I want to find all accounts that have greater than or equal to annual revenue of $10,000. So it's not a range. It's just, is it equal to this value or not? And so we can move the annual revenue over. We can also move pick list over, so you can check that. Or if you wanted to, you can even move things like owner ID. So we want to find all accounts that belong to John Smith. And you can set that in there and say, we want to find all accounts that belong to John Smith that have an SLA expiration coming up within the next 4 months and are active customers. So we can set all that up and quickly find that data. And again, the user doesn't have to know how to create those reports. They can just simply fill out those fields and have the data pulled back very quickly. So now that we have that set up, it's going to ask if you want any defaults set. I do not. So we'll click Next. The second step is going to ask how you would like to interact with your results. The default is what Salesforce usually uses, and that's a reference-only view, which means that you can look at the data and you can click into the data to open a record, but you can't physically modify it in line. So what we can do is click on an editable table, which means everything is editable at all times, or you can make a complex table. And this is if you want some fields to be editable and other fields to be display only. So we'll choose the complex table for today. And once we do that, the middle section opens up. And it asks, do you want the users to be able to create a record if they can't find the one they're looking for? Should they be able to make that record in line? You can choose yes or no. I don't want them to, but you can give them access to that. We also want to give the users the ability to make bulk edit changes. So let's say that they need to change the end date for the SLA expiration. They need to move it forward by an extra month. They can do that. They can select 4 or 5 records, mass changes, and click OK. Now we're going to click Next and go to step 3. Step 3 is going to ask you what search results should be viewed. What columns should we display when we find a record? So I would like to display the account name. Let's see, the account number. We can display that. The annual revenue, since that was an important one for me. The annual revenue. And then whether the customer is active or not. Now, all of those, notice, have a pink eye next to them. This means that those fields can be modified. They can be input. Whereas on the left-hand side, notice there's 2 active fields. One of them's got a blue O. And then it's display only. So let's show how that works. If I scroll down and we find the owner ID, okay, I don't want my users to be able to change who owns the account, so I'll just shift the owner ID to display only, so they can't change that. And then we will click Done. Now the 4th step that we skipped, that is for a details panel, which we won't have time to cover today, but it basically allows you to have sort of a console-like feature inside of that page. I can actually show you one real quick. If I open up a record on the account screen, notice there's a details button next to these contact records. If I click on the details button, it would actually open up a side console view and then allow you to make changes to that data, save it, collapse the console view. So you could have something like that on your search template when you find records if you want it. And that's step 4. So now that you've got your page created, we now need to deploy this page into Salesforce. So again, click File, Deploy, and send it in. All right, so now that it's completely deployed and into Salesforce, we then can open this up and take a look at the page that we made in 3 minutes. So this is typically a fairly complex page if you were to rewrite it by hand. But again, here's my ability to go and find all my records between $10,000 and $1 billion. And we can find that data. Now notice this one looks a little bit different. Oh, did I touch something wrong? I did. 1 billion. There we go, more records. Notice that the color change looks a lot different than this one here. Well, why is that? Well, that's because this page here is using the standard colored layout that Salesforce provides. The original one that I showed you, I had taken the TerraSky website, CSS, and I applied it to our internal pages so that it looked like the same color scheme, or color theme, if you will, of the website. So it has a similar look and feel. This is perfect for community usage or if you have to publicly expose something to partners. The other thing I should point out on this page is that notice that the account name, account number, revenue, and active status are all editable, but owner ID is not. So again, I can go through and select all of these accounts, click bulk edit, choose the active status of no, and click edit. And now all of those have been modified. They haven't been saved yet. So I then can save those records and commit those changes as needed. So that's how simple it is to make a search template and give your users really powerful search criteria to find the data they need very rapidly. And then for the last thing that we'll show today is a wizard template. Okay, so we'll click File and New, and this wizard template is going to build on the things that we just showed. So again, this is going to be the replacement, or I guess an alternative, I should say, to using the visual workflow that Salesforce has created. So if you can't get exactly what you want out of that, try using our wizard template and you should be good to go with a lot of those complex changes that you need to make to your flows. So again, you're going to choose a base object to work with. So I'll choose account again and click OK. Now what this is going to do is give you a blank area to work with. And you're going to have to pick and choose what pages you want to add in and what order they go in and what information is going to go on each page, but it's fairly easy to set up. Notice that on the right-hand side there's a blinking yellow area, and it's called Add Page. Okay, so you're going to get to pick and choose whether you want the Salesforce layouts, which was the very first thing I showed, to use. What's where they have containers, the data is put into columns, it's organized data. Or you can use the middle option, which is the free layout, and that's where you've got the form, nothing's in columns, you just drag it wherever you want and put it on the page, and resize as your heart's content. And then the third option is what we call a summary screen. That's grayed out because there's no data to summarize yet, but as we add in a couple of pages, the summary screen will be available for us to leverage. And what that will do is it's going to take all of the data from the first couple of pages and then put it onto a single page for your users to review before they commit the record to Salesforce. So it's just a last-minute check before everything gets finalized. So let's go through and create this. So we're going to add a standard page. And notice it gets added to the page list with that nice long date timestamp name that you can change. So go ahead and click Edit, and here's the page. So just like we had in the previous one, we can drag on a couple of fields onto the canvas and edit this to our heart's content, put all the data in. Now I'm just going to put in a couple of fields on this page. I'm not really looking at what I'm putting on. Maybe we change this to a 3-column view and put some more stuff on here for billing. But at the end of the day, the user's not going to add a whole lot on this first page. We are then going to say if the customer is active, okay, if this account is active, let's put the active field on, that I want this page to go to the step 3. If they're not an active customer yet, then I want this to go to step 2 for the user to enter in the contact information and the maybe, let's say, any task that they have to enter in. And then from that point, we can transition into just the overview. Okay, so we're going to go back into the Wizard tab, and we're going to add in another page. And this is page number 2. So this is what happens if the account is not active. And I have not set up that logic yet, so don't worry, you haven't missed anything. So I'm going to drag off this component here, this middle component, and I'm going to put on the page blocks. Okay, 2 page blocks, because remember I said I want to be able to add in the contact data, and I want to be able to add in maybe some task information. So some follow-up tasks that the sales rep may have to create. So component 47, I'm going to change the title property on the right-hand side to be my task data, and then component 46, we'll change this to be contact data. Okay, so let's change that. There we go. And now we're going to add in those contact records. So I'm going to change the buttons, hide those. Now, how do we add in related lists to a page? Well, there's a section called data tables. Okay, so I can drag on a data table and drop it in. Now it's going to ask me what related set of information I want to show. So I'm going to select my contacts and click OK. Okay, so now it gives me 3 columns, just like I had previously viewed on the other pages, and it adds the Add button by default. You can uncheck that, obviously, on the right-hand side if you don't want it. Where is that? It's a simple checkbox, so Add row, and then you can adjust that as needed. Okay, so we'll leave that there, and we will work with that. The next one is we need to add another data table onto the canvas, and this time we're going to choose the task object. Okay, we're going to add in some related task information. Now we need to populate those columns with data. So I go back to the Object tab on the left-hand side where all the fields are, and remember, this field bank I'm currently looking at is the main pages object. So in this case, it's the account. So I need to go to the Relative Object tab, and then choose the drop-down menu and choose Contact. Now that I've done this, I can add on the first name and last name of the person. So there's my first name, there's my last name, and maybe I want to add on their, let's say their title. Okay, first name, last name, title, and then maybe the phone number as well. So I can insert a column, adjust that one, and then add in their title and email address. Title, email address, and phone number. Okay, so there's their email, and then their phone number, business phone. Okay, so now that we have those added in, let's also choose the task object and add in some of these. So we're going to have the subject as number 1, we'll have a priority, and then who we're assigning this task to. Okay, it's as simple as that. Now that we're done making all this, let's go back to the wizard and the wizard tab, and now we're going to add in that 3rd page. Notice this is a confirmation screen. So remember, if it's an active company, we just want to modify the data and then save it. If it is not an active customer yet, we want to create the account and add in new contacts, and then we can review the account. So we click the Add Review area, and when I click on this 3rd page, it's going to pull in the data from the other 2 pages and populate it onto this page. You don't have to recreate all of that. And notice everything is in display only. Okay, so now we have all the data that we're reviewing. You can go in and make some minor changes as you want, and then click Save. Okay, so now that we have that done, we need to add one last thing, and that is the logic to tell our page number 1 when to transition to page number 2 or 3. Remember, that's going to be based on the active field. So I'm going to choose the Next button, and when the user clicks this Next button, we're going to tell it when to change. There's a destination page property. Click that. Now this is where we're going to add in that logic. Again, you don't have to be a programmer to do all this stuff. We're going to give you the business logic side. Although if you are a developer and you really want to go into the code and do this with JavaScript or Apex redirects and stuff like that, we do give you the option as well. But I'm just going to show the business user side for now. So you can click Add Transition. Now we're going to add in the business logic. So we're going to say when the active field, choose active field, is equal to no, we want to transition to page 2. However, if the active field is equal to yes, then we want to transition to page 3. Okay, so now we have that set up. We can click OK, and we now are able to deploy that page. And it's going to create that wizard and deploy that in. You then can assign this wizard to be the pages or the wizard that's gone through whenever you have a specific tab that's clicked or a custom button that you have or something of that nature. So we can go ahead and click Open and walk through this really briefly. And then I will wrap it up with that. So this is the account name. We'll call it Test. Okay, if it's an active status, we'll go ahead and shift that over. And notice we get taken to the review page. Remember, this is page 3. And that was based on the active status being yes. I'm going to click back, And now I'm going to change this to an active status of no and click next again. Okay, so now we're taken into page 2 where we can add in our contact data and our task data, and then the user can click next and get taken into page 3 and finalize all of that data. So again, that's how you create a wizard, and you can make those as complex or as simple as you'd like. But again, it does provide a nice alternative to the Salesforce's visual workflow. So with that, Nick, I am done. We can open this up for Q&A for the last 10 minutes or so. So if you have any questions, feel free to either write it in chat or